Okay, so as you can see, I have my NVR here. With a couple of PoE ports. My LAN port plugged in, and I'm actually not going to use the PoEs in this demonstration. I'm just going to plug everything into the LAN. Okay. So the difference between the LAN and the PoE, I'll show you just now. So the PoE will pretty much, if you plug a device into the PoE port, it will, if you plug a device into the PoE port, it should automatically detect it. And if the camera needs to be initialized, it'll come up with a couple of menus saying, do you want to use the NVR's username and passwords, etc., etc., etc. But if you do a device search, which I'll show you just now, it won't actually pick up on the PoE, doesn't actually pick up on the device search. The device search is ready to be used for your LAN port, which is that one, and not your PoE port, which is over here. So I have my LAN port here connected into my switch over here. You can see it's one of these plugins here. And then I have 3 cameras sitting on my PoE, 1, 2, 3 sitting on my PoE. And I have, we're plugged in my laptop. And I'm not sure what the other thing, oh, this one's plugged into my DVR. So my DVR is going, NVR is going into this one, PC is going into this one, and then my 3 cameras which are plugged into the switch. Okay. So now you guys have an idea of what hardware side of things look like. Get my, yes, generally what I find is Internet Explorer tends to work a lot better than your Chrome. Chrome always asks for, Internet Explorer asks for plugins to be loaded, which load quite easily 90% of the time. Chrome, there's a whole lot of setups in Chrome. Sometimes Chrome works depending on the device. I am finding that Chrome with the newer devices, Chrome is working a lot better. And then with the older devices, your Internet Explorer tends to work a lot better connecting to it. Yes, I'm just going to start off as far as getting your PC into the same IP range as your cameras. So let me use this one here. So I'm going to go on my PC, I'm going to go into my control panel. I'm going to go into my network so that I can set up my network card to be in the same IP range as my DVR is. Remember what I said in the training, the default IP address is generally 192.168.1 range. So we need to be able to set this, our PC into the 192.168.1 range, not 108. Remember the default IP is generally 108. So anything else, we can basically set that into the range so that we can see how to log in remotely to the DVR. If you're doing this on the NVR itself, obviously you don't need to worry about it. All you do is you go and you, on the screen, you can go on screen, you can go set your network settings, go and change the default IP address from 108 to something else. But I'll show you that once I've actually got my PC set up. In this case, I obviously need to use my PC because I need to show you guys how to connect. I need to use the PC so that I can display this by Internet Explorer, display it to you guys. So I'm actually not doing it on the NVR. I'll be using Internet Explorer to connect to it. But once I get into it, you'll see the menus are pretty much the same, whether I'm using Internet Explorer or physically working on the NVR itself. So in this case, I've obviously got my LAN connection, so my local area connection. Let me just drag this back onto your screen. So if I select that, this opens up. If I go to properties here and IPv4, okay, so I've already set my thing. Normally, as default, mostly people use obtain the IP address automatically. So if it's set to that, then you just need to change this. to manual, simply just type in the IP address that you're wanting to use. I don't know, doesn't matter at this case. The subnet masks do need to match, so you do need to be in the same subnet mask as your device. So generally, that's your default subnet mask for that area. Maybe a little tip that I can show you on this side of setting up your PC to be on the same IP range. So let's say, for example, you are setting this DVR up. You know your cameras are all on the 192.168.1 range, and you want to do it like I'm doing it via your PC. And you have decided that, but you're going into the customer's IP range, and the customer's IP range is maybe at 10.1. or 10.2.2 or something to that effect. Let's call it something totally different, 10.0.0 range, which some of the default routers are. So you want to be able to seamlessly switch between the customer's network and the DVR without having to go and change IP addresses the whole time. So what you can do is, if you go to advanced here, you can then go add the other IP range in. So let's say 10.0.0. And then again, it needs to be a unique IP address. So I'm just going to take 22 as well. Because I'm in a different IP range, I can use the same IP address and just remain in the same subnet. So add that. So now I have two IP addresses. So it doesn't matter whether I'm trying to connect to the 192.168.1 range or whether I'm trying to connect to the 10.0.0 range. It's still going to allow me to connect to both of those IP ranges without having to go and redo my whole laptop and redo everything again, again and again. So you can obviously have a few IP addresses here, and you can just seamlessly switch between the two of them. Okay. Thanks, Christian. A bottle of bells, you say. At least I've taught you something, eh? It's perfect. Great. I'm glad when I see people are learning things. Okay, so that's your network settings. Obviously, if you're doing this on the NVR itself, you don't need to do this. It's only if you're wanting to connect your laptop to the DVR or camera or whatever the case is. Nice thing about this, if you do log into your cameras, your IP cameras, you can actually do this with different IP addresses if you want to try and change the IP address on the camera itself rather than the NVR or whatever the case is. So what I find a lot here is what happens is the guys happen to plug the cameras into your PoE ports, then it gets an IP, automatically gets an IP of 10.1.1. Either 65, 67, 60, whatever. Those are 65 upwards. So that's the default is 10.1.1 range. And then they take it off there and they plug it into their LAN port or their switch, and then they can't find the cameras and they can't connect to them. So this is a good thing to, have that 10.1.1 range available as a secondary thing, and then you can actually connect to the cameras as well. Okay, so let's just close this off here. Okay, so now I'm in the 192.168.1 range, so I should be able to connect to my cameras. So just put my password here, which I've typed in wrong. Okay. Don't mind about my disk, seems to have crashed, but anyway. All right, so now we are in the menu. So this menu should pretty much look the same as your menu on your NVR. So whatever you're doing here, you should be able to do on your laptop as well as the NVR itself. So imagine that on the NVR, we're going through this on the NVR, and you can pretty much get the same functionality. As I say, the only real reason I'm on is to be able to display it to you guys. So if I go to settings up the top here, and I go to camera. So obviously the main difference between this menu, I think on the NVR, you'll have your tabs at the bottom here for whatever's under settings. So the only real difference is that these tabs here actually display at the bottom of your menu. But on the web interface, you've actually got to go to settings and go into them separately. Okay, so that's really the only thing that I know is different as far as the web interface and doing it on the DVR itself or NVR itself. Okay, so in this case, we've got our NVR. Okay, maybe I should just take a step back just to the network side of things. So I generally always start off here, go to my TCP/IP. I know I'm going to be adding cameras that are on the same IP range as your NVR. So generally what happens is if your NVR is on the same IP range as your cameras, then you'll end up not being able to search your cameras. So you see here, I've already changed my IP address of my NVR here to 100 instead of 108. So I just want to show you quickly that I am actually able to search for my cameras. So we'll go back to TCP/IP now. So you can see I'm actually able to search my cameras, and you can see two of my cameras are actually on the 108 range as default. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to set my DVR back to default, the network. I'm actually going to set it back here to my 108. And if this thing doesn't call me a liar, then if I try and go and search for my cameras now, I probably won't find anything. And he's calling me a liar. I wonder if it actually took that IP setting. No, it didn't. Okay. Let's try 108. Okay. Should actually throw up. Interesting. Did I actually click OK? I probably didn't. Okay, so Christian, your default gateway is basically is your router's IP address. So under network settings, okay, you see now I've actually lost, because there's an IP conflict, I've actually lost even my web interface service. So if you guys give me 2 seconds here, I'm actually going to have to go onto the DVR now. So that's how bad the IP conflict is, that it won't even let me get into my web interface again. I will put you guys on now. I've just had to use my HDMI cable. So let me just go in. So not only has it, will it not search my cameras, but it actually kicked me off the, but what I was trying to explain there is, if your DVR is in the same IP address as your cameras, when you try to do a camera search, you probably won't be able to find anything. Whereas because I was actually trying to connect to the DVR via my web interface, it actually kicked me off altogether. So because now I've got an IP conflict and it doesn't actually know who I want to connect to. Do I want to connect to the NVR, or do I want to connect to the cameras? It's like totally confused. And it's like, oh, well, I don't know who you want to connect to. So it's basically just kicked me off. Okay, so I'm just going to change this directly on the NVR now. So if you guys can bear with me. Okay. Let's just make sure that that has taken that setting. Yeah, it has. Okay. Okay, great. Plug you guys back in here again. So now I'm going to move away from 108 back to 100. Okay, yeah, I'm back again. Okay, great. so to continue. So now you'll see, so I'm sure you guys understand what transpired there. So as soon as I actually change the back to 108, I've got an IP address conflict because my cameras are also on 108, and it just threw my laptop off altogether. So to go back to your question there, Christian, when do you set the gateway? Okay, so the gateway, okay, so there's two different ways you can actually set up your TCP IP settings here. So you can either use DHCP. So if your customer, for example, if you're plugging into your customer's router, 90% of the routers use DHCP, especially for home users. You might get to a company or something that doesn't use DHCP and only uses static. So the easy way to check that is just go onto one of the computers and go to your network settings and go and see whether their computers are set to static or whether they're set to DHCP. So like I say, 90% of people use DHCP because there's people going with laptops in and out, and you go home and you want to use your laptop, and you come to the company and use your laptop. So, and there's different IP addresses. So DHCP is just an easier way to assign IP addresses. So, so DHCP will assign those IP addresses automatically. It'll assign your IP address automatically. It'll assign your subnet mask automatically. It'll assign your gateway automatically, and it'll assign your DNSs automatically. Okay, so if for whatever reason you don't have DHCP, then you obviously want to go the static route. So if you are using DHCP, then you must make sure that your cameras are not using DHCP. Because if your camera's IP address changes, so DHCP also can change IP addresses. So it's not too important on your NVR side, but it is important on your camera side. So your cameras must always be set as static. Because if your camera's IP address changes, that means that your NVR no longer can see that camera. Oh, you can't see my screen. Did it kick off your sharing? Sorry, guys. Let's have a look. Ah, sorry, my apologies. Share. Okay. Can you guys see my screen now? Cool. Sorry, man. My apologies. I didn't realize it took off my share. Okay, so to go back here, so like I said, you've got an option of static or DHCP. Like I said, on the NVR, it's not too important, but on your camera should always be set as static. Okay. If you are setting it as static, then your gateway here needs to be set, or your IP range firstly needs to be the same as the customer's IP range. So, so in other words, what their computers are running, what their router is running as IP range. So it's pointless having their network running in a 10.0.0 range and you trying to connect to their router at 192.168 range. So this will always be your gateway, will always be your router's IP address. So it's basically your default gateway is the gateway to the internet. So you've got to tell your DVR that the gateway is the customer's router, internet router, and this is where it's living. So this is the gate that you need to go through to get to the internet. So in other words, in this case, 192.168.1.1 is the router's IP address. There is no router with that one. So let's say you're trying to actually say, okay, I want the IP address of 192.168.1, but my customers is at 10.0.0.1. When we save this, it should actually bomb me out and say, what are you talking about? So you can see there, it says the default gateway is not in the same range. So you can't actually do that because you're not in the same IP range. So your IP address needs to be in the same IP range as your gateway. So if the customers, whoopsie, 192.168.1, what is this thing doing? I've got my arrows on or something. Non-lock. 192.168.1.1. There we go. Okay. So is that good, Christian? Do you understand that? As far as the gateway is concerned? And when you need to set that gateway? So as soon as you want the DVR or NVR to have access to the internet, this is when you need to put in the IP address of your internet router at the customer's place. Okay, to sum it up. Okay, just a quick thing over here as well. Seems to cause a lot of confusion. When the system comes as default, you'll see that you don't have a DHCP option here. So with the old menu, everything was on the main screen. So you could actually not set your DHCP on here. So the problem here is that you actually need to edit over here. You need to modify this and actually set DHCP on here. Save it. I'm not going to do it now because it's going to kick me off again. You need to set DHCP on there, and then you'll see your DHCP for your DNS will become available. So this DHCP is actually only setting your DNS DHCP. In other words, what your router will assign. And this is actually your main setting. Your TCP IP settings is actually what needs to be set for your LAN. Okay. So while we're under this networking screen, I just want to show you the difference between so this is all your LAN settings. So whatever you're doing here, you are setting on your LAN port, not your PoE port. Your PoE port settings is over here, your switch. So you see here, your switch, all you can do is change the IP address of what your switch is. You can't change this to the same IP range. Oh, come on. 168.1. Let's call this 10. So you can't change this to the same IP range as your LAN card is. This thing doesn't like me putting a dot in between the. Okay, so if I try to do that now, it should throw me up an error to say that I can't have the same IP address. That's a bit quick there. I can't get it to stay there. But basically it's saying I can't be in the same IP range as my LAN card is. Just refresh that. So, like I say, for your PoE ports, your settings are under switch, and all you can do is actually change that. So if, for example, you wanted to change it for whatever reason to something else, then you can. But there shouldn't be a reason why you actually need to change these IP addresses. Yeah, there's no real need to. But just understand your main settings for your LAN port is all under TCP IP. All right. So the other thing that we quickly, while we're under network, is your P2p function. The P2p function, if you're wanting to use the app or remotely connect to your device from other networks, is generally that your status needs to be, your P2p needs to be enabled and it needs to be online. Okay. So obviously I'm not connected to any internet from this NVR because I'm still on the 192.168 range, and there's just far too many cameras on our network to be able to demo this. So I haven't actually put this onto our network altogether. So the way I've got my laptop set up at the moment is, in order to stream this, I'm connected to my Wi-Fi, and my DVR is connected to the, obviously just as a standalone little thing to my laptop's LAN port. So, Christian, yes, all routers do. You know, you'll probably find a lot of the places you go to that the routers are in the 192.168 range anyway. But I know some of the telecom routers and that type of stuff run on the 10.0.0 range. And some of the other routers, just depends on the service provider at the end of the day and what range they want to set it to. but most people leave it on the defaults of 192.168.1. So when you connect your NVR or XVR onto the DHCP, then it'll automatically grab whatever range and you'll be able to see what it is from there. Okay. And then you can obviously set your cameras, which I'll show you now. Okay, so is that all good? You guys understand how to add your stuff to the network? So either use DHCP, or if there's no DHCP, use the static on your DVR or NVR. Okay, from settings side, okay, so now you're going to go and you want to add your cameras to your DVR, because as you can see, we don't actually have any cameras added and it's just a blank screen. And next option is to go to camera. Okay, so we're going to, because everything is on the LAN port, if you have plugged the camera into a PoE port, it should auto-populate at the bottom here for you. So these are the cameras that are connected. If they've got a green tick, that means they've automatically connected and everything's fine. If they've got a red cross, then it means there's under status here. If it's got a green tick, they've connected automatically. If they've got a red cross, it means that there's something wrong. Normally the password. So if you, for example, have a camera that is set to a different password and it's already been initialized somewhere else, then it'll automatically, and you plug it into your PoE port, let's try to automatically add that camera with the password on the NVR, but it was unable to, and you need to go and tell you need to tell the NVR that the camera's password is something different to what the password on the NVR is. Okay, so that's basically your PoEs will plug in here. Auto-populates here as soon as you plug them in. Okay. Because we're working on the LAN port, we need to go do the sorry, sure. A cup of coffee didn't soothe my throat, eh? So we need to go do a device search. So hopefully we should pick up my 3 cameras. So there's my 3 cameras. So one of them is 2 of them are status green tick, and one of them is a cross. Why would that be? Anybody got any ideas? I know the answer. Okay, so the reason it's showing me the red cross is because that specific camera is actually uninitialized. So you'll see, okay, so yes and no. No, it's not the IP conflict, because those 2 that are on the same IP address, see those 2 on the same IP address. Yeah, but okay, so this one is also got a red cross, simply because it's actually uninitialized. So if I select this tab here to only show uninitialized cameras, you'll see that only the one with the red cross is uninitialized. So initialization is you will see it on all the new cameras that you get. If you get the camera, the first thing you need to do is initialize the camera. So what they mean by initialization is you need to add a password and you need to do the whole email address and adding the email address into the camera to initialize its password. So over here, what we can do is we can now say, okay, this camera is uninitialized. So these 2 cameras are initialized, but that one's not initialized. So I'll tick uninitialized, and it only show me the uninitialized cameras. Now I can tick this camera here and I can say initialize this camera. Okay, so here I've got an option to use local password and email. So whatever I've got set on my NVR will automatically transfer over to my camera now. If I don't want that, I can say no, I want to put my own password in and my own email address in. So as long as your NVR is set up correctly and has got the correct email address and that type of stuff set for if you ever had to reset forget the password, so your email addresses and stuff are set up correctly. If you're confident that that's that, and that's the way you want to do it, then you can just leave the tick on and you can say next. Then the next step is it's going to say you want to set it as a static and you want to give this camera an IP address. So yes, you want to give it an IP address, but you don't want to leave it on 108. because we don't want IP conflicts. So we're going to call this one 99, let's call it, doesn't really matter. And my gateway, you can either set this gateway as your NVR, so that means that the camera will not have internet access, which in some cases you want it to, in some cases you don't. So if you don't want the camera to be able to be accessible from the internet directly, then put the IP address of your NVR in here. If you want it to be accessed automatically, then obviously you need to have this in the customer's IP range, and you need to put the customer's router's IP address in here. In other words, the gateway. Okay, so in this case, we're just going to leave it as it is. I'm not going to bother with changing it because I don't have internet access on my NVR anyway, so I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm going to say next. Okay, and it says it's initialized successfully. Great stuff, all happy. Okay, great stuff. Now if we do a device search, okay, let's just take off my uninitialize here. Do another device search. Hopefully all my ticks will be green. There we go. Okay, so there's the camera that we initialized now. It's got a green tick and it's happy. Okay. As you saw, we still saw the cameras with the IP config. So two cameras had the same IP. What I found a lot is if you have two or more with the same IP address, then often your search device doesn't work. Or like I said earlier, where I was trying to show you guys, but I got kicked off. If your NVR is on the same IP address as your cameras, or one of your cameras even, then it doesn't do a search device. So just look out for things like that, where if the search device thing is not populating your stuff that is on your LAN port. Okay, so now we want to add these cameras. So what we can do is we can select all of them if we want, or we can just say at the top here, just select all of them, and we can say add. Okay, so it should auto-populate at the bottom here. If we give it a couple of seconds, we should see them come green. I hope. Okay, sometimes I found that you need to just refresh your screen here. Okay, so it didn't refresh those automatically. So I've got to, I think on the DVR, if you're on the NVR itself, then it auto refreshes. But if you're on, because I'm on the web interface, it's not auto refreshing. I've had to go out and come back in again. Okay, so that should be our cameras added. Like I said, if, for example, which camera is this? Let's take this one here. So, for example, my password is wrong. See, now I've got a red dot as my status. Okay, so that camera is not going to add because obviously the password is wrong because we set it wrong. I think if we go into live view here, I hope I can see it on my web interface. And I'll try to open those cameras. Come on. Okay, I'm not sure why my camera's on showing my interface. Come on. Okay, could be something to do with my Internet Explorer. Yeah, I've got to love Internet Explorer sometimes. Was I trying to show you guys? Oh, the password. So on your screen, sometime on the NVR, it'll definitely show you. On the NVR, it'll probably show you that it's that it is invalid password, username or password. I think it says invalid username or password. So again, if you come here and we just change the password, we should hopefully get a refresh. selected in code rather. No, that's my Windows. I thought it was that. I just spelled it wrong. Doesn't like it. So the joys of doing it live. Okay, so let's try it this way. If I search. Okay, you notice now that my other two cameras don't show up on my device search because I've already added them to the bottom here. So it's actually ignoring the fact that they are actually on my network. So they're not actually an available device because we've already added them to the bottom here. So let's try add this one again without messing with its password. Unless, of course, it's locked that camera now. Let's see. Okay, give me 2 seconds. Let me see what's happening on the DVR itself. Yeah, my account is locked. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, so I've obviously put the wrong password in and now my account is locked. Let me just reshare my screen again with you. Nope, wrong one. Okay, so on my DVR, it's showing that my account is locked. So easy way, working with IP cameras is pretty simple. I just have to unplug my camera, plug it back in again. Unplug it, leave it for 10 seconds or so, plug it back in, and we should be able to log back into that camera. I had some firewall issues earlier where yeah, they've actually had to uninstall my antivirus because yesterday when I was testing, it was all working perfectly. This morning I get to work and I'm setting up for this demo and nothing wants to work. They updated the antivirus last night and yeah, it just blocked everything. So I was running around with IT just before this presentation, begging them to take off my antivirus, which they did. So please don't send me any viruses right now because I'm not protected, especially covert. All right. Just talking nonsense now. Just trying to distract you guys while we wait. Okay, so these cameras are taking a while to come up. There we go. All right. So all I did was unplug my camera, 10 seconds, plug it back into my PoE switch, and done and dusted. My cameras are back online. All right. Okay. So my other options, obviously, as far as setting up the cameras are concerned, if I wanted to, for example, set this camera up as on its own web interface, and I could actually log into that camera itself. If my firewall doesn't block me. Okay, so this is still part of the initialization screen, but it doesn't obviously affect the camera, so you don't really worry about this. So if you want P2p access, obviously you want to enable that, otherwise just go through it as per normal. Which one was that? Yeah, it wants us plugins and that type of stuff. So just to show, I'm not going to load the plugins and that type of stuff. It's just going to, but just to give you a guys idea, so you can actually log into the camera and do your settings, like your network settings. So if you want to set it to static or DHCP, which, like I mentioned before, not really recommended putting the cameras on DHCP, simply because of the DHCP sometimes changes IP addresses, and then you'll end up losing your camera. Your DVR then doesn't know where your camera is. So different scenario if you've got them plugged onto the PoE port. If it's on the PoE port, you leave it as DHCP, because the NVR will always know where that camera is. But because you're on a LAN, the NVR isn't controlling your DHCP, your client's router is. If that IP address changes and the DVR is trying to look for your 1.99, and suddenly your DHCP on your customers decides that it's 150 today, then your NVR is going to go, huh? You were supposed to be 99. Where are you now? I had no idea that you moved to 150, because your router doesn't talk to your NVR, because it doesn't need to. Your router is the boss, not your NVR. Okay, so your router makes all the decisions, not your NVRs. It doesn't have to check back to the NVR to say, hey, Mr. NVR, have you got any cameras that I shouldn't change? So no, it's not like that. Your router will always make your decisions as to when it wants to change IP addresses. So that's why static is always a good thing. Even if you can go to a point where if you get to a company and there's lots of computers and that type of stuff, talk to the IT guy and say to him, can you reserve, so you're installing 16 cameras, can you reserve 20 IP addresses for me? And then you set everything to this. So he'll do a reservation. So he might ask you for MAC addresses, which is a bit of a pain. Otherwise, he'll say just use from number 20 to number 40 or whatever the case is. But if he does ask you for MAC addresses, then you'll have to go in and check each camera, and then you'll give him this number here. I think it actually does show you, if I go back here, yeah, does it show you the MAC addresses here? I think it just shows you the serial number, not the MAC. So your serial number and your MAC address is two different things, just FYI. Let's see now, this won't let me just see. So I'm just going to drag this off onto my laptop here quickly and see if I can. Just trying to see on the end whether it actually gives you your MAC addresses or not. Clearly it's not allowing me to. Okay, so if the IT guy does require MAC addresses, just have a look on the NVR itself. It might show them under here. Just see, maybe I'll leave it show it here. No. Okay, if it doesn't show you on the list, I think it might show it on the NVR. It's not showing us on the web interface. But yeah, your MAC address will basically, this is what the MAC address he'll ask for if he does want MAC addresses. So what they do is actually they reserve an IP address to a MAC address. So the router will know never to assign those IP addresses to something else. So that's why I say, rather speak to the IT guy and ask him to reserve a IP address. So there's two ways of doing it. You can either link a specific IP address to a MAC address so that it will always remain of that IP address, or you can just say, okay, I will exclude from your DHCP, he will exclude the range, say 20 to 40 or whatever the case is. So he'll just exclude that. So when the router is assigning DHCP IP addresses to the other devices, it will never assign 20 to 40. Hope that makes sense for you guys. I might be getting a little bit off track and off a little bit too technical. If I am, just say to him, what the heck are you talking about? Yeah, I did remember to share this time. Thanks, guys. I didn't actually realize it disconnected my share when I disconnect my HDMI output, but clearly it does. So that was a Zoom thing, not my laptop thing. Okay, so that was that. So that's it, guys. I mean, really adding those IP addresses. Christian, port settings. You want to know when you change port settings? As in which ports are you talking about? Are you talking about your network ports? These ports? You're talking about your port 37777 and the ports. Okay, so you shouldn't need to change that port. So your GDMSS, your Smart PSS, any of those, your P2p. So in order for your devices to, your Smart PSS or DMSS or anything like that to talk to your NVR or DVR or XVR remotely, will talk via, as default, port 37777. So you should never need to change that. When you create your P2p will create a tunnel from your NVR, XVR to the Dahua's P2p servers. So just FYI, your Dahua has just installed 4 brand new P2p servers here in South Africa. So we should start seeing an increase in traffic speed and that type of stuff. We no longer, in order to register for P2p, we no longer need to go overseas. And this has happened recently, like very recently over the last month and a half, where those P2p servers for South Africa have actually come online. So we should see a speed increase on P2p traffic. So hopefully that'll make things a lot easier. That's FYI. But once you register P2p, actually your P2p and stuff talk over this port 37777. If you change this TCP port, for example, if you can't use 37777, I don't know of any other software or device that needs 37777, but let's take a scenario where you have to change it for whatever reason. Then you can change this port, but you need to remember you need to change it on your DMSS or your Smart PSS as well, because as default, it'll always use that 37777. If you're talking about changing your port on your router, so there is a few cases, especially with companies and corporates, where the ports are blocked. So 37777 might be a port that, because it's not very commonly used, unlike your port 80s and your 554 and those type of things, which is your internet ports, your internet browser ports, those generally will be open. So if you go to a corporate and you can't get your P2p online and it's not working, you saw a change on site, okay? I'll chat to you now about it. So let's say, for example, your 37777 is blocked at the corporate side. what you'll need to do is ask the IT guys to open port 37777 and forward that port to your IP address of your NVR or XVR for that matter. But normally that happens, your P2P sometimes will come online, but because it can go out and register to the P2P server, and when it sends a message back again, it's not coming, it can't get that signal back because it's been blocked by the port. So your P2P might be showing online over here, but you can't get your DMSS or Smart PSS remotely working on the device. Could be that that port is blocked by your customer's router and that it hasn't been forwarded to, to that IP address of your NVR, XVR. Not normally the case on your general home users and that type of stuff, because that P2P connection will generally be created. So, Christian, you're saying you saw a change at a site. So it's probably a manual intervention where they went and changed it under here, under network and port. So somebody was either fiddling, might have taken out the 7, but not an issue. If that's the case, if that's a port that they want to use or whatever the case is, then you just need to remember when you're setting up your DMSS or Smart PSS, trying to look remotely. So you will need to double check and see that you have set it in your DMSS or Smart PSS as port 3. In your case here, 3777 instead of 37777. Okay, hope that answers your question there. Okay, so there are a couple of other tools which I do want to mention, which you can use on the Dahua. So connecting to NVRs via your PC or whatever the case is, you can either do via a web interface, you can do via Smart PSS, you can do via a config tool. And that brings me basically to this toolbox option. So this is available on I think it's available. We've just had our website recreated, so it should be available on the IDS website. If not, then just go to the dahuasecurity.com website and you should be able, and just search for toolbox. And there's a whole lot of, I'll call it lacquer stuff, nice stuff to be able to use. Namely your config tool, which I'll open now. So the idea of this toolbox is to give you guys the tools to be able to do a whole lot of stuff. So the config tool, I mostly use the config tool and my disk calculator. The disk calculator is also a cool tool. Let me just open this one for you quickly and just show you briefly what this is all about. So this is a disk calculator. So what you can do here is you can calculate what streams you're going to be using for your cameras and what size hard drive you basically want to use. So let's take, for example, we've got a 16 channel, 16 cameras. We don't have a H.265 DVR or NVR, so we're still going to use H.264. That's not showing me H.264 plus. I don't really want to use H. Okay, I'm just going to select H.264 just to give us the. Okay, so our resolution of our camera, let's call it a 2 megapixel, and our frame rate of our cameras. Generally, your cameras run either somewhere between 25 frames per second, which is on 95% of your installations is not really necessary. You can go right down to 15 frames per second, and that's still your normal TV quality as far as movement and that type of thing are concerned. So you'll still get smooth movement and you'll get that. You just won't have those high density of frames per second. So what a frame per second is how many pictures that your frames per second is how many pictures it's going to take within 1 second. So if you've got it set to 15 frames per second, it's going to take 15 pictures in a second to make up your video. If you've set up 25 frames per second, that means it's going to take 25 pictures in that 1 second to make up that same video. So as you can see, unless you're using it for things like people counting money or in a casino or places like that, then you start looking at 25 frames per second and up. If you're looking generally at end user's garden that the dogs are running around in, that you just want general video footage if somebody comes into the garden or something like that, 15 frames per second is ample. You can even go down to 10 frames per second. But I generally suggest 15 because it gives you a nice movement, smooth movement, and you're basically saving a heck of a lot of hard drive space at the end of the day. So 15 frames per second. So if you look at your bit rate, go to, you see if your bit rate automatically increases to 3,413. So that's the rate of what it's going to transmit. Whereas 15 frames per second, it goes down to 2048. 2048 for a 2 megapixel camera is still a little high. You can switch this down to like 1024, which is your full HD frame rate, basically 1024 megabits per second, or kilobits per second. Anyway, that over and above, that's not what we actually were discussing here. So if we say now, man, wasn't what I wanted. Obviously, if you wanted audio and that type of stuff, then you can add that in as well. Where is my, okay, so down here you will see now at 16 frames, 16 channels running at H.264. Not sure why it's not allowing me to, maybe because of that. Okay, so we say high. So environment, high quality. It hasn't really changed my megabits per second, but this is basically how many megabits per second on average is going to stream across your 16 channels. So on your specs of your NVR, you will always see, you know, how many megabits per second it actually allows. So if you've now decided that, okay, actually I want 12 megapixel cameras, and your NVR can only handle a stream of, say, 50 frames per second. You can, a stream of 50 frames, goodness me, why do I keep saying that? 50 megabits per second, then you will see, okay, you're well over your quota here. There's no ways you can put 16, 12 megapixel cameras onto this unit. So then you've got to step it down and go, okay, let's use 4. Okay, shucks, 4 megapixel cameras won't fit into my 50 megabits per second either. So I'll have to stick with my 2 megapixel cameras at 15 frames per second, which will give me my 32 megabits per second. Okay, so that's a nice thing to use. Over and above that, you can actually calculate your hard drive. So how many, so let's say recordings I'm going to be doing, I have a hard drive of 1 terabyte, and I'm going to be recording 24 hours a day. If you're not going to record 24 hours a day, you maybe got a motion detect, how much motion detect you're going to be using. So maybe it's a scenario where you only have motion detect during the day, nothing at night, or whatever the case is, you can decide. So I'm just going to leave this as 24 hours, and you can say calculate. So according to this, if you have 16 cameras, 2 megapixels, you're running at 15 frames per second, you're running at 32 megabits per second, you will get 2 days, 18 hours odd of recording onto your 1 terabyte hard drive. So obviously, if you now go into your 2 terabyte hard drive and say calculate, you'll get 5 days. And so far as you go up, you'll get 8 days, etc., etc. So that's a cool little tool to just get an idea of what you're going to be streaming. Same if you change your compression ratio here, you'll see 265, H.265. Let's take H.265 straight. See, H.265 now you're going right down to 16 megabits per second. So if you're using H.265, you could, and you've got a 15 frames per second, and your cameras and your DVR can run H.265, then this you can still push 4 or 5 megapixel cameras at 30 frames per second and still fit into your 50 megabits per second allowance. So when I'm talking about the allowance here, you will see, will I see? I don't know whether I'll see it on my web interface. Okay, I don't. Okay, on your NVR itself, down the bottom here, it normally tells you what your usage is. So it gives you a little report on your usage and that type of stuff. So yeah, you don't see it on the web interface, unfortunately. So in your NVR, it actually shows down the bottom you're using so many megabits per second. That's quite cool. Go back to that. So I digress. So a nice little tool to use for the disk calculator. The other one that, like I say, in your toolbox is your config tool. Open your config tool here. Oh, it's going to find all my cameras because I'm on Wi-Fi as well. Okay. Why does this thing not allow me to maximize now? Silly thing. Okay, it's not allowing me to make the screen any bigger. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so it's not allowing me to make it any bigger. It's a bit sad. Christian, you say not all tools. I think in order to use the tools, you need to actually be logged in if you want to download the tool. So in your toolbox here, you have an option to log in. I think it's under there. So if you log in to your toolbox, so you register and you log into your toolbox, then you should get all the tools. So you've got to install them first. And then once you've installed them, then they become option to open them. I think if you're not logged in, then it doesn't allow you to install it. Okay, let's just try to get back to this again. Okay, so you see your config tool here basically allows you to then search for anything on your network. So here you can see the ones that we've got on mine, 192.168.1. So it's now searching my Wi-Fi as well as my LAN card. Whereas obviously when we were on my NVR, it was only searching on my LAN because that's all it knows and all it recognizes. So just to know what I wanted to actually say here, you can obviously refresh it here. You can do search settings. If you do search settings here, it allows you to change what you actually want to search on. So you can say other segments, only this segment. So if I say only this segment, I should get, oops, current segment, sorry. Let's select one of them at least. It's still going to search my Wi-Fi. Okay, I can't disconnect my Wi-Fi anyway because then you guys won't see what I'm doing. Okay, so anyway, so to cut a long story short, the nice thing about this is you see this highlighted red here. This is showing me that there's actually IP conflicts on my network. So there's a 108 and there's a 108. There's two different devices on 108. So I've got actually IP address conflicts on what's now. But it highlights it quite nicely. As well, if you have uninitialized devices, so you can say, what do you want to see? I want to only see uninitialized devices. So it'll only show you the uninitialized devices. Or I only want to see initialized devices. So you can just tick and untick these little ticks here and it'll filter your automatic filter according to what you actually want to see. Then you can do things like you can reset. Okay, so if you're wanting to use, there's obviously like edit functions, you can go and you can now edit this. Sorry, it keeps popping onto my other screen. You can edit the IP address of this device. Okay, so if I was to try and change the IP address of this device, okay, you see I've got a orange exclamation mark that comes up here. It's very frustrating. It keeps popping onto my other screen. And what does it tell us? It tells us password error. Now, where on earth do I set the password on this? It's actually very simple. So if you go back to your search setting here, you've got to set your password over here to whatever your camera password or your DVR password or whatever is. So if you're using a specific password, then that will become, then once you do this, you can go back there and you can say, okay, and it should actually pass. I don't know whose camera this is. I'm actually not going to even change it. I don't even know where that camera is sitting. It's not sitting with me. Somewhere in the company here. Someone's put it online. So I'm not actually going to mess around with it because I might be messing with their stuff. But the idea there is to, if you're wanting to log into the camera or make a change, you need to make sure that your password over here is set correctly in order to be able to log into that camera and do the changes that you want to change. Okay, because as you can see over here, you don't have an option anywhere to be able to put passwords or anything like that. So when I first got this tool, I was really confused and I couldn't figure it out. It got me a couple of times. So just a note. Okay, so there's a couple of things you can do here as well. You can go and you can change settings. You can go and default. So you can go and default your cameras and all that type of stuff. You can go and set times as long as your password is set correctly here. If you've forgotten your password, it becomes a problem. Okay, so you can go set times, you can set some of the stuff up on here. You know, play around with the tool, download it, play around with it. It's actually quite a nice tool to use, and it makes life a lot easier than trying to use like Smart PSS or whatever the case is. So the tool is available, use it, abuse it if you need to, and yeah, it's nice little tools to use. Other ones, you can obviously download Smart PSS from here as well. From your the nice thing about this tool is it tells you when there's an upgrade of a version of something. So all you do is you select the config tool. Again, you do need to be logged in to do the upgrades. So you select it and you just say upgrade, and I'm not going to do it now either. Upgrade, and it'll upgrade you to the latest version. So it notifies you once you're logged in and notify you to say there's upgrades, etc., to use. So quite nice tool to use. Whether you'll use all of them, probably not, but there are specific tools for specific applications. There's your Smart PSS. You can obviously come into your toolbox and just open Smart PSS from here. You can, like I did with my config tool, I just opened it from my toolbox. There's little things like your project designs and things like that. So just extra tools to make your life easier, especially when you're trying to design a network. Make sure that you're getting the right NVR for your application and all that type of stuff. So nice double check before you actually go out. Even maybe double checking the IDS reps. So, and that's pretty much what I have time for today, guys. Thanks again. I hope that was informative. Enjoy the rest of the day.